Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this dissemination event for the midterm review of the Malawi National Social Support Program 2. My name is Bessie Msusa, the Chief Economist in the Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs, and I'll be your moderator today. So this event is organized by the government of Malawi in collaboration with the socialprotection.org, with financial support and technical support from the GIZ Social Protection Program. So I'll briefly give you a brief background on this event today. So the Malawi National Social Support Program, which was adopted in 2018, we have been implementing it since then up to 2021 in October. That's when we instituted this midterm review. So the idea for the midterm review is to determine the degree of achievement of the proposed goals and strategic achievements, activities defined in the implementation plan. This dissemination event, therefore, will mark the end of the midterm review process by providing us an opportunity for those involved in the review to present the results and findings along with the recommendations to accelerate the achievements of the objectives set for 2023. So welcome, colleagues. There will be no question and answer, but you'll be putting your questions in the chat box so that they can be answered later on. The agenda today for the event. So we'll have welcome remarks by the director, Mrs. Zimpita, and then we'll have a keynote address by the PS of Economic Planning, Dr. Woodford Masanjara, who's going to give us an overview of the social protection sector and its value role within the Malawi economy and society. After that, we'll have a keynote address that will be done by the German ambassador to Malawi, Ralph Tinman, who's going to give us a congratulatory message to the government and the continuous cooperation between German and Malawi in social protection sector. Then we'll have a state of MNSSP progress and outlook for the future of the program. And this will be the presentation by our lead consultant, Anthony Lang, who is going to present the findings and the results. And then we'll have a video documentary after that. And then we'll have a panel discussion where our key panelists are Daliso Kalimba, the Deputy Director in the Poverty Reduction and Social Protection, Deputy Director Laurent Kansinjiro in Ministry of Gender, more specifically looking at Social Cash Transfer Program, and Albert Saka, the Chief Education Officer for Ministry of Education, and then Stanley Chuti, the Acting Director of Infrastructure and Economic Service for the National Local Government Finance Committee. And after that, the director, Madam Zimpita, will wrap it all by giving us the closing remarks. So let me remind the audience that this is not an interactive event. Unfortunately, due to short time that we have today, we are not able to take questions from the audience. Our objectives is to share the key conclusions and recommendations from the midterm review of the Malawi National Social Support Program 2, and to inspire the future policy discussions and decisions. So the Q&A question box, therefore, won't be available on today. I'll introduce the panelists accordingly when time comes. So at this point in time, I would like to ask the Madam Zimpita to give us her welcome remarks. Madam Zimpita, please.
Okay. Thank you very much, Bessie. Once again, I would like to welcome each one of you to this event on the dissemination of the findings and recommendations of the midterm review of the Malawi National Social Support Program. As already indicated, the Malawi National Social Support Program, which is in its second phase, is the main framework for the implementation, for the design and implementation of social protection programs in Malawi. And it has been an exciting journey for us to take a step back and see how we have been doing things with respect to the implementation of the program. The midterm review process has also given us an opportunity to reflect on how better social protection programs in Malawi can be improved upon to ensure that the lives of the many poor and vulnerable are uplifted. So today we are going to receive the final findings and recommendations, which require us to take on board and see how best to implement them. The dissemination event will also give us an opportunity to share our experiences as well as to showcase some of the activities that the program has achieved so far. And for all that have been part of the midterm review process, I would like to say thank you. We value all the contributions that you have made to make this midterm review a success. And I believe that the review has laid the necessary building blocks for further improvement of the social protection program in Malawi. Otherwise, I would like to invite every one of you to be part of this presentation on the various presentations and discussions that are going to be presented before us. Otherwise, I thank you for your attention. Over to you, moderator.
Thank you so much, Director, for those warm welcome remarks to all of us. As we continue with our program, I'll now want to ask the PS, Dr. Winford Masanjara, to give us a keynote address on the overview of social protection sector and its variable role within the Malawi economy and society.
Timmerman, Madam, Your Excellency, the German Ambassador to Malawi, Ralph Timmerman, Madam Patricia Zimpita, Director for Poverty Reduction and Social Protection, Mr. Alan Walsh, GIZ Country Director, Dr. Petra Wagner, GIZ Team Leader, SPP, distinguished representative of various projects and partners, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome each one of you this afternoon. I am pleased to be opening this important event whose objective is to disseminate the findings and recommendations of the midterm review of Malawi's second National Social Support Program. As many of you may be aware, the second Malawi National Support Program runs from 2018 to 2023 and was developed and approved by all key stakeholders following an extensive review and consultation process as a main framework for ensuring the government can operationalize and deliver on its own national social support policy to protect and uplift the lives of poor and vulnerable households. The second Malawi National Social Support Program envisions to deliver social support by providing income and consumption transfer to the poor and food insecure, protecting the vulnerable against livelihood risks, and enhancing the social status and rights of the marginalized with the objective of reducing extreme poverty as well as the economic and social vulnerability of poor and marginalized groups. The second Malawi National Social Support Program has been designed according to 5 distinct but interlinked thematic pillars that serve to support the achievement of both the vision and the mission described in the National Social Support Policy. Moreover, the second Malawi National Social Support Program, if implemented as envisioned, will also support the achievement of our other key national and international development priorities, such as the Malawi Growth and Development Strategy, the National Resilience Strategy of 2018 to 2023, the National Agriculture Policy of 2016, the African Union's Agenda 2063, and indeed the Malawi Implementation Plan of 2021 to 2030, and it contributes towards the UN Sustainable Development Goals for 2030, particularly SDG 1 and 2 to end poverty and hunger, SDG 4 on quality education, SDG 8 on decent work and economic growth, SDG 10 to reduce inequality, and SDG 13 on climate action. I would like to say a little more about the second Malawi National Social Support Program and our own aspirations. Malawi's mandate for coordinating and implementing the second Malawi National Social Support Program are in the ambit of the Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs. We are the custodian of the MNSSP and are therefore required to provide overall leadership by setting the policy direction and facilitating coordination, alignment of line ministries, and implementing partners from various NGOs and international development agencies. In executing these roles, we are faced with immense challenges. We are thus pleased that this midterm review will shed light on several issues that deserve our attention if we are to succeed in achieving our goals for the remaining second phase of the Malawi National Social Support Program and beyond. At the outset, a critical issue will be, at the national level, how we can enhance working together across different implicated line ministries, development partners, NGOs, civil society organizations, and with other sectors. That's an important value addition of this midterm review, will be to help us understand where we stand and how we bridge the implementation gap by strengthening the existing linkages between the second Malawi National Social Support Program, core programs, as well as with other important sectors such as education, health, and disaster risk management. I want to take this opportunity to thank the German Development Corporation and our other development partners for your support on our journey to eradicate poverty in Malawi. I wish to thank you once again for participating in this important event. Thank you very much. Zikomo kwambiri.
That was PS Masanjala giving us his keynote address. As you have heard from the PS, he has linked the social protection agenda in Malawi with the National Investment Plan, the National Agriculture Investment Plan, the EU agenda, the SDGs, and the National Resilience Plan. I now want to ask the German ambassador, His Excellency Ralph Tinman, to give us his keynote address.
Principal Secretary in the Ministry of Economic Planning and Development, Public Service Reform, Dr. Winfried Masanjala. Director of Poverty Reduction and Social Protection Division, Patricia Zimbita. GIZ Country Director, Alan Walsh. GIZ Team Leader, SPP, Dr. Petra Wagner. Distinguished representatives of various projects and partners, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome you all to this event to disseminate the results of the midterm review of Malawi's second National Social Support Program. I'm delighted to be opening this important event together with the Principal Secretary, Dr. Winfried Masanjala, and the Director, Patricia Zimbita. The German government acknowledges the important contribution that the social protection sector is making to address the causes of persistent poverty and to reduce the vulnerability of the poorest population in Malawi. Without social support programs, poor and vulnerable households would become more prone to economic uncertainty, food insecurity, and social exclusion, and would likely remain in poverty for generations. Therefore, we believe in the social and economic benefits of the second Malawi National Social Support Program, as it fosters greater productivity, social cohesion, increased inclusive growth, and it contributes to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. For this reason, this midterm review of the program is crucial, as it will galvanize our joint efforts to alleviate poverty and to increase the economic opportunities for the people of Malawi. So what progress has been made? As we will all see, the MNSSP II goals are broad and challenging. They call for very great collective action among many and diverse stakeholders, and they demand strong leadership and coordination from the Ministry of Economic Planning and Development, as well as a readiness of all line ministries and district officials to engage appropriately in the program's implementation. But much has been achieved already, and thus I would like to take the opportunity on this occasion to congratulate and honor the efforts and commitment of the government of Malawi in achieving these set goals. However, in the last 2 years, as everybody knows, the ambitious agenda of the National Social Support Program II has had to contend with the COVID-19 pandemic. This pandemic in Malawi, as in other countries in the region, has considerably affected the functioning of the government, the national economy, and also the international cooperation community, as well as the availability of financial resources. It has moreover introduced new demands and challenges requiring the reprioritization of some activities and the introduction of some unforeseen interventions. With these challenges in mind, let me mention some key areas where we think German development cooperation commitment will be vital. Firstly, our German development cooperation will further support the government to strengthen leadership capacities of central level institutions and in selected districts in implementing the social protection programs. Secondly, we will continue to support Malawi's Unified Beneficiary Registry to ensure that household data and core information for user programs are readily available for regular social protection programs and also in times of shocks. And lastly, our German Development Corporation is committed to the social cash transfer program and its several working areas, such as targeting, data management, lean season support, and transfers. Ladies and gentlemen, for all of us, this midterm review presents a great opportunity to reflect on the findings and recommendations and to strengthen our partnership in the fight against poverty and vulnerability. I hope that during my tenure as German ambassador to Malawi, that I may witness that all poor and vulnerable groups in this country will have access to the needed social support. Thank you for your attention. Zikomo kwambiri.
That was the German ambassador to Malawi, Mr. Ralph Tinman. Thank you, Ambassador. As you heard from the Ambassador, the social protection agenda, it's a development agenda. It will support us in contributing to the achievement of the SDGs. If we want to leave no one behind, social protection is the way to go. At this point in time, I want to ask now our lead consultant, Anthony Lang, to give us the state of MNSSP progress and outlook for the future of the program. Anthony, this is your turn.
Thank you very much, Bessie, and good morning to everybody. It's a great privilege to be here and to have this opportunity to present the results of the midterm review. Of course, I'm the team leader, but as a team leader, I had other colleagues working with me, and I would be remiss not to mention them. So this assignment was carried out by myself together with Jimmy Kawaye, Luca Nyirongo, and of Sarah Jane Wilkinson. So we were a team of 4 people who conducted this assignment. I think I'd also like to extend a word of appreciation to all those we have been working with, particularly to those who were agreeable to engage with us, share their information, share their insights, particularly to acknowledge the support we got from the government of Malawi and their readiness really to let us into the kitchen, not just to hear the good news, but also to understand where the challenges are and the issues where the challenges arise. And that was really helpful to get a good insight into the implementation of the MNSSP II. And of course, we'd also like to appreciate the support that was provided, the facilitation by GIZ, the German government, in enabling this assignment to take place. So my task is a tall order. This is, as you've heard already from various presenters, this is not a simple program. It's a multi-pronged set of initiatives that fall under the MNSSP II framework. And to cover all the ground and to provide the level of depth and analysis across all areas, it certainly was a challenge. And now I have just 40 minutes to really, in a nutshell, present what were the key findings of our review, what were the conclusions we've drawn in particular, and the recommendations that we have proposed. I think I can pass over the first few slides fairly smartly because really you've received the introduction and orientation from previous presenters. But essentially this midterm review was about judging performance. How well are we doing? We set goals in 2018, what progress has been made? So it's very much about tracking progress, but not simply from a perspective of accountability, but also from a learning perspective. In other words, to understand why things have worked and why things haven't worked and what remedial actions might be required. Also to consider perhaps where there might be some reprioritization. Also to consider the institutional arrangements that accompany the implementation of the program and to provide therefore recommendations on the way forward. Just a couple of words on the scope. It was agreed that the scope would be very much at the activity and output level. That means very much on implementation and the extent to which service has been delivered, service delivery focus, rather than an impact study. So this was not supposed to be focusing primarily on the impacts of the services delivered at household level, community level, individual level, although to some extent that was done, but primarily to see the extent to which the system is delivering the services it seeks to deliver and the extent to which it has developed the systems to enable services to be delivered. It was very much guided by the pillars. You've heard about the pillars, and I'll just show you a slide on that in a second. There were 60+ strategic actions that framed the implementation plan, and that provided us the reference point for checking against what has been done, what hasn't been done, why, etc. It's very much qualitative. There are some statistical information, but because it wasn't really on the outcome and impact level, we were very much more looking at processes, the processes through which systems are developed and the challenges that are encountered there. So we paid a lot of attention on understanding the opinions of the key role players at various levels in building the social protection system. In that sense, it was very much multi-stakeholder. We spoke to development partners, we spoke to various arms of national government, but also with local government at the district level, at the traditional authority level, and also at the community level. And we did hold focus group discussions with selected beneficiaries of the social cash transfer program, public works programs. And of course, the review period was between 2018 and 2021. Perhaps just one other thing to mention is that, of course, MNSSP II, as I mentioned, is made up of a number of different programs. For instance, a social cash transfer program, public works program. We were not doing a detailed evaluation of each and every of those projects and programs. And there are many indeed under the resilience pillar 2 component. So we are there looking primarily at secondary information that could give us a better sense of how all of this is coming together. Therefore, what I provide now is really what I would call a broad sweep and a deep dive. And should you want to get more information, there is of course the main report, and we've also produced a sort of a policy brief that provides a digest of some of the key findings. I think you've seen this drawing of the MNSSP. This is a sort of graphic depiction of the 5 pillars which have been referred to. And let me just quickly mention those. The first pillar is consumption support. That's basically ensuring that households have access to cash or in-kind support that enables them to meet their basic needs. And that's supported primarily by the social cash transfer program, public works program, and the school meals program. Move to the middle, we have pillar 2, which is resilient livelihoods, which is about empowerment, capacity building, and enabling households to move beyond reliance on cash transfers to meet their immediate consumption needs, but where there's opportunity for them to invest in more productive activities to enable them to engage more in economy and in society. The third pillar, shock-sensitive social protection, is about ensuring that there is a mechanism that enables the social protection system to respond when there are adverse situations that place additional vulnerabilities on households, whether these are predictable or unpredictable, slow emerging or rapidly developing. So how can the system then link up and ensure that there is responsiveness there? The fourth pillar is about linkages. And really this is a cross-cutting issue that aims to encourage the different individual projects, programs, and pillars to link up. That, in other words, the sum is greater than the individual parts, and we need to ensure that those different parts are drawn together. And for that to happen, you need to have pillar 5, which provides for system strengthening, which is really building up the institutional, organizational capacity, systems and processes that move us away from a projectized approach towards more of a system-wide, whole of government approach to social protection. So what I'm going to be now doing is going through each of the 5 pillars and very briefly touching on what was the ambition, what were the key conclusions, what we've drawn, and what are the recommendations. And of course, as I say, this is a broad sweep. For the detail, we would invite you to look at the detailed report and policy brief. So consumption support, the strategic objective was to provide consumption support through timely, predictable, adequate cash or in-kind transfers to poor and vulnerable people throughout their life cycles. These are the conclusions that we draw. First of all, that pillar 1 builds on and expands and improves on already existing programs. Social cash transfer pre-existed MNSSP II. Of course, we had the previous MNSSP, and it has a genesis in pilots that happened beforehand. We had public works programs supported through the MASAF program, the Malawi Social Action Funds. These predate MNSSP II, but they have grown along and adapted into the second phase. And likewise for school meals program. Really, the strategic objective for this period, for this MNSSP II, was about revisiting some of the design considerations, introducing some innovations, and really expanding coverage to ensure timely, predictable, and adequate support. So these are very much qualitative things. There's a quantitative element about increasing coverage, but it's about ensuring the quality of delivery timely, predictable, and adequate. Overall, we recognize that there has been some solid progress in a number of domains, which we'll look at towards achieving that objective. But it's very much work in progress, and anyone who works with systems and delivery mechanisms knows that there are always things to tighten, bolts to tighten, ways to adjust the way we're operating, continuously learning by doing to improve the way we do things. If we look at the four main areas we've addressed, is coverage increasing? Indeed, as far as the social cash transfer program, the target that was set, which was to reach 320,000 households, has almost been reached. And it increased from 175,000 at the start of the planned period to currently approximately 290,000. So there's been significant expansion reflected in the increased coverage across the different districts, with all 28 districts now covered. The story of public works is somewhat different because there was a big review of the MASAF program, which was the main instrument through which public works was supported through the World Bank funding. A program has been substantially redesigned, and during that process, the numbers involved in public works reduced. There was a piloting of a new initiative, and it is now starting to grow. But the absolute number of persons involved as compared to the past is lower. So there we've seen a decline, but now it's on the way up. School meals program, we've seen steady progress. There's still a long way to go. There's been an increase from some 1.6 to 2.8 million learners who have access to school meals, but that still only represents about 58% of all learners in the country. So some good results there in terms of coverage. Are the right households being reached? There is an issue and concerns around continuing inclusion and exclusion errors during the identification selection of households. That is still a concern, and it requires some ongoing work in terms of the mechanisms and the ways, systems and the approaches within which the selection and registration takes place. However, we do note that the UBR, as the main instrument for registration, has now expanded substantially over the period of MNSSP II. We are now in a process where a number of districts are reaching 100% coverage, so that all households have been reached in terms of registration and data collection. A lot of districts still at about 50% coverage, which was the initial target to be reached before moving to 100%, and a few that are just behind. But generally, there's been some significant progress in extending the reach of the UBR. There is an ongoing discussion at the moment about whether or not the categorical targeting might be a more appropriate way to address the needs of certain cohorts of the population, of the vulnerable, that are not necessarily adequately covered through the existing system. That's still a debate. There's a concept paper which is currently being circulated within government to see whether or not this may be something that needs to be piloted and tested and might address future iterations. So it's something that will definitely be an important talking point as you move towards the next generation of the MNSSP II. So let me move on. Are lives improving? The issue then is, are the transfer values adequate? And of course, one might say, well, of course, they'll never be as good as we would want them to be. And there are some concerns that with the rising cost of living, inflation, that the increases that have been provided are not making a material difference or improvement in the lives of beneficiaries. However, when we look at impacts, the story is quite mixed. There have been impact analyses, there is anecdotal information that shows that many households have been able to benefit in one way or the other from the access to cash transfers, whether it's in terms of paying for out-of-pocket expenses for sending their children to school, whether it's enabling some households to actually invest in productive activities and engage in resilient livelihood programs, but also concern within the community that say, look, this is just not keeping up with the cost of living, and that in absolute terms, the money that we have available in our pockets is declining. What I think all of this shows is that the cash is important, it's necessary, but not sufficient, and it reinforces the notion of cash plus, that with cash that addresses that immediate safety net requirement, but there's a lot that can be achieved through initiatives that are covered under Pillar 2, which we'll move to in a second. Our programs working together, as you've heard, one of the ideas is very much to build linkages, to strengthen collaboration within the pillars and between the pillars. And I think what we find is that programs are all in continuous evolution, but they tend to work in their own, let us use the word silos, in terms of their standard operating procedures, in terms of their reporting requirements, in terms of their design characteristics, in terms of the way they are staffed and managed. They are still very much on their own. The Social Cash Transfer Program is developing a 5-year strategic plan for the Social Cash Transfer Program. The MASSA 4 was redesigned as a social support and resilience, the Resilient Livelihoods Program for public works as a public works program. School meals program runs as the school meals program. The linkages that are between there are not necessarily reinforced, and is an issue that one can ask, well, does that matter? Or is it crucial that we try to bridge those to have a better impact? Some recommendations, and let me just take a sip of water. On coverage, and we would be very keen to see expansion of the school meals program so that it becomes a fully national program. We see that through the Social Cash Transfer Program. We would like to see the brothers and sisters of the Social Cash Transfer Program in terms of the expanded program of public works, the school meals program, also becoming truly national programs, obviously based on the appropriate criteria for coverage and targeting, but that there should be opportunity across the different parts of Malawi. In terms of targeting, I think I've already mentioned this, the issue of categorical targeting. It may take time. It's not one of those knee-jerk reactions where you suddenly say we're shifting from X to Y, but further investment. And I think it would be very good if a decision can be taken in principle in time for the MNSSP III, so we know which course we're going to be charting as we go into MNSSP III. If I look at transfer values, I think obviously something where we require continuous ongoing analysis to consider the adequacy of the transfers that are provided and what households are doing with it, what difference it's making. And this can also help to provide a basis for developing cost projections in the event that there is a decision to increase transfer values as we move to MNSSP III. What are the cost implications? Because in the end of the day, it has to be paid for. And where is that money going to be coming from? And what is the justification and rationale for perhaps increasing if that was a decision to be taken? So some solid work on cost is important. In terms of national frameworks, I think it would be good that we can, and I haven't mentioned this so far, within the school meals program, there's been a big push around the homegrown approach, where we also try to encourage households, farmers at the community level to be engaged in the production and sale of foodstuff to schools. Sort of win-win thing. It's not straightforward, but it's been expanding. It's perhaps only reaching some 5 to 10% of schools. But I think it'd be very good to get some more learning and guidance around the homegrown approach. There's a lot of experience from the region that can also be drawn upon. Similarly, we're in a new phase of the expanded program of public works with a much stronger focus on, for instance, environmental protection, catchment management. Let's also learn what are the payoff that's through this new approach. Let's not wait to the end for an evaluation. Let's try to build in as much action learning as we implement. So let me then move on. Resilient livelihoods. This is our second pillar. Pillar 2 is about promoting resilient livelihoods through tailored packages based on individual household and community needs via poverty graduation pathways, inter-program linkages, and facilitating access to and the use of services beyond MNSSP II. And I recall from our last presentation during the validation workshop, we said, that's quite a mouthful. It makes a lot of sense, but to actually get government departments all over the world to link up, to be able to provide very targeted, tailored packages that meets the needs of specific needs is very challenging. It requires a certain level of sophistication in the way in which departments function, their management information systems, the staffing, etc. This is not an easy thing to do, but it's the right thing to do. So we say that Pillar 2 has if we look at the conclusions, Pillar 2 has the ambition of introducing, which cash plus interventions, in other words, moving beyond just receiving a cash stipend towards to see cash plus as an integral and complementary part of Malawi's social support system. Very much today, if people talk about social support, they think about the cash transfer program, which is fine, but what's MNSSP II very much is trying to do is expand that and say there are a number of cash plus activities and interventions that are very much part of the social protection system and need to be integrated. There are a lot of initiatives already. This is, again, not new. A lot of graduation pathway, resilient livelihood activities that predate MNSSP II. What I think really now comes out is the need for some strategic reflection on how we operationalize and structure this cash plus agenda. Again, for the reasons I mentioned, because it's not easy to do. It requires quite a high level of sophistication in terms of interdepartmental collaboration, both horizontally and vertically. In this respect, we do have to know that it was very difficult to assess the performance of Pillar 2, in the sense that strategic actions lacked some precision and there were few performance indicators. In terms of what does success look like? When is graduation achieved? How do we distinguish graduation from resilience? There are a whole number of questions and related issues or metrics that come out. So the criteria for assessing have we done well was not very clear. What is clear is that there was a lot of activity taking place. I mean, there's really quite a number of different interventions which are contributing definitely towards the Pillar 2 agenda. But I think we're still some way off before we have a national framework in place that fully articulates what that cash plus agenda is. And that would certainly be something that should be the substance of MNSSP III. Just again to highlight some of the key findings, is there a shared conceptual framework building on what I've just said? There's a graduation concept note in place, and there's much learning that is happening. There is some still sorting of ideas that needs to take place between what we mean by graduation, what we mean by resilience building, what we mean by cash plus. So a little bit of getting the hierarchy of terms and terminology clear so that we have a clear understanding of what it is and what it isn't. And most importantly, the pillar working group that would provide a framework for doing so hasn't been in place. And it's absolutely needed to steer the learning, the codification of experiences, the formulation of national strategies and guidelines, etc. In that sense, what we find is that Pillar 2 activities still remain very much off system, in the sense that they rely very much on delivery through the support of implementing partners, national and international NGOs, providing a crucial service. But the question is, in terms of scalability and institutionalization over the long term, to clarify what are the roles for government, what are the roles for international implementing partners, what are the funding mechanisms that can best support a sustainable approach if we want to also increase coverage in terms of access to such initiatives. Certainly we see that there are the newer generation of programs under Pillar 2 very much have heeded the call of MNSSP II to make the linkages to Pillar 1 and ensure that some Pillar 1 beneficiaries are now benefiting and participating in Pillar 2 activities. There's a lot of research also that's taking place at the project and program level. It needs to be drawn together. And that raises the issue about the fact that the pillar is still highly fragmented. There is a huge knowledge base, but it needs to be pulled together. And the role of local government in particular needs to be clarified in terms of its role in coordinating, facilitating, but also learning and holding to account the different role players in this space. Some recommendations which build on that is to clarify. I think I've been informed that the graduation concept note has been reviewed. It is a living document, so I think it's going to be used as a reference point and will be updated in due course in the spirit of learning as we do. I think it would be very important that we have a meta study on all the different cash plus experiences so that we have a better handle on the universe of activities that are taking place. And that can provide a basis upon which we can develop some how-to documents and broader guidance on what we mean when we talk about Cash Plus. The institutional framework, for me, the most important thing is to get that pillar working group active. There's a huge agenda for it of work for it to do, but also to ensure that we clarify linkages with the National Resilience Strategy, which you heard about, which also has its pillars and frameworks and monitoring and evaluation frameworks for resilience-related activities. We also need to clarify the roles and responsibilities of local government with respect, as I say, to the design delivery of Pillar 2 activities, and what that then might mean if we want to go through an upscaling process. Let me move on in the interest of time. I think I only have about 10 minutes left. Third pillar, shock-sensitive social protection. The strategic objective to develop a shock-sensitive social protection system that meets seasonal needs, prepares for and responds to unpredictable shocks, together with the humanitarian sector, and supports recovery and the return to regular program. Here are our conclusions. Pillar 3 introduced the concept of shock-sensitive social protection as a mainstreamed component of Malawi's social support delivery system. So in the same way that we're bringing Pillar 2, it's more than just the consumption support activities. We have Pillar 2, we also have social support very much mainstreamed into our thinking and operations. So moving from more ad hoc to more fully integrated and structured responses, closely aligned with the humanitarian and disaster risk management sectors. I think we can say that the pillar has scored mixed results. There have been some very important achievements, particularly in the realm of predictable lean season responses, but with much more to do in terms of systematizing the way we respond to unpredictable shocks, as well as designing an overall vision and institutional architecture. I think it's also important to mention that whereas our social cash transfer program and public works program, and in fact, school meals program have a role to play in shock sensitive support, also mindful, of course, that our investments in resilient livelihoods, graduation, are building more resilient communities, more resilient households and individuals, but also better placed to withstand, of course, depending on the nature and severity of adverse events. So that's an investment in preventive and action. What have we found? Is there a shared vision and ambition? A common reference point is not yet there, which clearly articulates the roles and responsibilities of the different actors. And this is important because it's not just about the social support family, it's also extending an arm out to the humanitarian disaster risk management, who already have existing structures. And therefore, it's important to understand what are those points of linkage that enable the sectors to collaborate and work together. So I think there's some implicit thinking going on there, but it needs to be more explicitly expressed, particularly as we go to MNSSP II, so that we're in a way singing from the same hymn sheet and have a clear idea of what is possible and what is not possible. In that sense, that relates to the second point about how well the pillar is coordinated. This has certainly proven challenging, in part because of pre-existing legal and institutional arrangements, both at the national and subnational levels, which means it's much more difficult to move the parts around. We have to some extent, live and work with those current existing arrangements, particularly in terms of humanitarian and disaster risk management. There are arrangements in law, institutional arrangements, coordination arrangements already prescribed in law. So modus operandi has been worked around the notion of collaboration, maybe more than coordination, and some recommendations on how this can best be achieved are reflected in a review that was conducted quite recently, just before our midterm review, on coordination arrangements for the sector. What provisions have there been for predictable lean season response? These are in place very much now. There's been experience from at least 2 years, 2019, 2020, to ensure that there are mechanisms to build in vertical expansion for social cash transfer program beneficiaries and also for horizontal expansion. It's building very much from the bottom up. Linkages have been made with the MVAC and the Malawi vulnerability assessment. and the ICP process in terms of identification, etc. And the UBR has been adapted to facilitate the identification selection of households. It's a work in progress because these systems need to be fine-tuned and refined, and there are bottlenecks in terms of delivery, in terms of the aligning of information systems, in terms of the funding streams, ensuring the money flows, ensuring that there is good communication between the different actors. In terms of unpredictable shocks, Malawi's had to respond on the situation. There's no time for planning as such. You've had cyclones Ida, you've had cyclone most recently Anna, we've had COVID. That demanded a response. And what's impressive is that a response was designed and delivered, particularly in urban areas through the Kuchi program, providing something similar to the social cash transfer program to identified hotspots in urban areas and providing a mechanism for providing cash to those households during the COVID period. We also see with the closing of schools, public of schools, that the adaptation of the school feeding program to a take-home ration mechanism in some places, also in cash rather than in kind. So that had to be done at speed and provides a positive experience to build on, not without its problems, but nevertheless demonstration that changes, speedy changes can be made. And as I've mentioned, the resilience component under Pillar 2, building resilience, clearly has a role in building the capacity of communities and households to withstand shocks. What we don't necessarily have is the evidence base to demonstrate to what extent and how. And this would be certainly an interesting area to explore. So our recommendations, as far as lean season support, is obviously more a refinement of an existing system, moving towards guidance and standard operating procedures, ensuring that there's a technical support that needs to be provided again to the district level so that they as role players fully understand where they fit in and where they sign off and how they interact with the national level. I think it's important, as I've already mentioned, that we get the the vision and the institutional arrangements sharpened so there's a common framework for all actors to work in. So not just within, all right, I've mentioned the social support sector, but also with the DRM and humanitarian support. And under unpredictable shocks, there is learning that can be drawn upon, and I believe this is already being carried out from these events, from Kuchi, from COVID, from the recent cyclone events, to see where does the shoe pinch, so to speak, where are the gaps in the system, and where are the opportunities to strengthen the way we collaborate. Let me move now smartly to Pillar 4 on linkages. Talks about conceptualized and institutionalized linkages as being key to addressing multidimensional deprivation and provide adequate consumption support, develop resilient livelihoods, and build shock-sensitive social systems. It's just reconfirming essentially what I've been trying to emphasize during this presentation. There is this specific pillar that is there to underscore the importance of that message more than anything else, but it's very much cross-cutting, and each of the other pillars are expected to build on that message. So what are our conclusions? That Pillar 4 proposes a set of strategic actions that promote linkages within and between pillars. Many build on or elaborate on things that we've already heard in these previous 3 pillars. So I think you've heard me talk about pillars. I think the main point is that the need for a specific linkages pillar, in our view, is well founded, given the predisposition of projects and programs to work in silos. And I think we know that it's not just in the social support sector, it's probably everywhere we work. We know how easy it is to fall back into silos. So an extra effort is required to forge those links across institutional and program or project boundaries. If it's not there, it will become a secondary issue. So it needs to be seen up front and central for us to ensure that we pay attention and that there are performance indicators built around linking. This is critical indeed if we want to move to what we envision as more of an interactive and whole of government social support system. So social protection isn't just the preserve of one line ministry, it is a whole of government approach that requires inputs and contributions and collaboration from multiple parts of government. I think there's not so much really to report here about the linkages over and above what I've already said, particularly with Pillar 3. I think we've just had that discussion. Between Pillars 1 and 2, we have certainly seen, as I've already mentioned, that a number of Pillar 1 beneficiaries are now benefiting from access to resilient livelihoods, graduation pathway initiatives, having access to loans and credits, having access to agricultural support, participating in income generating activities. I've mentioned the graduation and resilience initiatives. There are also the many village savings and loans associations and initiatives, some that work independently, they are standalone, others which are very much part of the package of support that's provided through these resilience and graduation pathway programs. What we do find is that the data is still rather scattered, so it's difficult to get a clear vision on the overall impact and coverage. One of the ambitions under MNSSP II was to create a kind of referral system specifically targeting the ultra poor to ensure their access and their needs are addressed in different parts of social services, particularly in health, education, nutrition. And I think it would be fair to say that at this stage, such a referral system per se is not in place, but there's been quite some research and analysis undertaking on the need for such referrals to be in place and to strengthen some of the linkages. And those in particular have arisen around the issues of nutrition. And now there's a working group, task force working on moving towards a nutrition sensitive social protection approach, which will therefore be a key part, a key thing for MNSSP III. We also see a lot of issues around education, a lot of barriers to access to education for particularly the ultra poor. Some issues which can be addressed through social support, but many that require action by the Ministry of Education. So here we are recommendations, very much in line with what I've just been talking about. I want to, in the interest of time now, move over to the last pillar, because it's a big pillar, system strengthening, the objective, strategic objectives, strengthening government leadership, promoting a coherent social support policy, ensuring program coordination, and encouraging harmonized, effective, and efficient implementation. Again, grand words, and we also know not always easy to implement, but absolutely essential, particularly when we want to move from a projectized to a more government-driven, integrated whole-of-government approach. What are our conclusions? Pillar 5 provides for the development of core components of an integrated whole-of-government social protection system that will indeed move the sector away from what has been fragmented, project-based, and somewhat disconnected delivery. Pillar 5 provides, in that sense, the backbone for MNSSP II that can facilitate a progressive shift towards the envisioned integrated system. I think it's important to again re-emphasize that MNSSP I, the original MSP, had much more of a project or program organized. That was the organizing principle. And deliberately MNSSP II, the designers of those who designed MNSSP II, said we need to break away from that and move towards a more thematic and pillar approach that cuts across individual projects, to move away from that projectized approach. So of course, the investment has been made and some considerable progress is being made, but it's a long way to go. These things require more than 3 years, certainly, institutional development, building the capabilities. These things are medium to long-term actions. There are concerns, underlying issues around PFM weaknesses in the government system. The issues related to the fact that we have very much project delivery modalities linked also to the funding, which means that there are some limits to the extent to which we're going to get full alignment. If you're familiar with the aid effectiveness system, aid effectiveness principles of working on system, on budget, on plan, etc. But there's scope for movement. Our concern as reviewers was the lack of progress in operationalizing the pillar working groups, which we feel are critical, underscore the thematic approach, and in the wider coordination mechanism, including functioning cross-program, cross-pillar planning, learning, and reporting. There were provisions for that, but they haven't really seen the light of day in the way we would have liked to see. And I'll be coming to that. So if we just go some over these points, and if Bessie will give me just 5 extra minutes to wrap up, I know I'm running short of time. How strong is MNSSP governance? Well, indeed, PRSP is the face of the program. It is exercising its leadership, but there are capacity challenges within PRSP, and its focus must be on coordination, system development, learning, and accountability. Very much the custodians of Pillar 5 and Pillar 4 to ensure that all the pieces come together. As I say, our concern has been around the pillar working groups, which were foreseen to provide the basis for linking and working as themes rather than programs, and they haven't really become operationalized. At the district level, on the other hand, there's been a lot of work done to set up district social support committees, which are more than entities to support the social cash transfer program, but are there to coordinate all social support, all pillars at the district level. They've been established, but it would be fair to say there's some way to go before they operationalize that vision of playing a coordination function. And there are issues related to horizontal and vertical information and accountability that need to be resolved, which are important in terms of ensuring that the ownership is also not just within the national line ministries and the coordination ministry, but also well-founded at the district level. To what extent have grievance redress mechanisms, are they working? I think what's important, what is the key development under MNSSP II has been to work towards harmonized GRMs. I think it would be fair to say that this is the destination. There's significant challenges remaining, but the journey has started in a number of programs to follow the guidance that's been developed and to see whether there can be opportunities, where those openings are, the opportunities for closer alignment and common systems. We have good experience, again, in the Kuchi system, setting up a call center, worked relatively well, a very positive experience, and it's being used as an opportunity, a learning opportunity for perhaps developing a call center system for the districts as well. So that's an important lesson. There's very much a pragmatic, I think a very sober, pragmatic approach to this, looking step by step at what can be done, because there are a lot of issues about interoperability of systems, the fact that there are different programs with their own accountability requirements set up under particular circumstances, and now we need to, in a sense, pull those apart and rebuild them with a common system. Again, complex work. How robust is the UBR? Well, I've already reported about its expansion in terms of coverage and moving towards reaching or covering 100% of households. I've mentioned also the fact that the system was adapted to support COVID and the rollout of also in Kuchi, also with the lean season support. We note that a number of programs are using the UBR, including some of the resilience livelihood programs and graduation pathway programs. But there are quite a number of operational challenges. There are concerns about the speed and costs of updating, and we held a webinar recently on issues of how do we keep these systems up to date and flexible. It affects everybody, no less in Malawi as anywhere else. And there are issues around how can technology fast track the process and overcome some of the logistical and operational challenges of keeping the system up to date. We learned also about on-demand registration from other countries. And then there's the institutionalization agenda. We know now that UBR is housed in the PRSP, but there's more work that needs to be done in terms of capacity building and strengthening the institutional framework. Is MNSSP supported by a strong MNE system? I think I've reported on this already, but MNE has to be the lifeblood of any learning system. And of course, as we know, the basis for evidence-based policymaking. That's even more critical to have a harmonized system when delivery is it has been fragmented, and we're trying to converge towards a more integrated system. So we feel that the non-functioning of the framework for the first years has been a weakness. There's so much data out there, but it was extremely difficult for us to piece it all together. But there has been work commissioned by the ministry to say, well, look, what then are the key indicators that we can work with that are accessible, reportable, and usable, and that can provide us a sufficient reference of where we're going, and guidance has been developed to enable districts to collect that data. On e-payment, the system has been adopted as the way to go. That's the direction of change in terms of additional efficiency, transparency, addressing issues of accountability. There's been successful piloting, and now it's scaling up, 14 districts. But we also know that it's not a panacea, that it does have its own glitches and challenges. It can also be abused, so it's not bulletproof. And there have been concerns raised, that experience also from Kuchi as well. So there are issues there that need to accompany the rollout in terms of addressing some of those sort of gaps or weaknesses in the system. But for those districts that remain offline, so to speak, and still manual, there are still challenges around logistics, operational budgets, etc., and misuse of the system that continuously have to be under the microscope. The GRM, of course, has a key role to play in ensuring that there is that when things are not right, they're called out. Another dimension is funding and the management of funds, and there's been provision for developing a social support fund. This is not a new idea, it predates MNSSP II, but within the life of the program, a task force has been set up. It was agreed that a study would be commissioned to explore options, design options, parameters, etc. The award is about to be made, if not already, in this period, and therefore we would expect in the immediate period that there will be some design work, scoping, feasibility, design work, from which the basis will be there for developing a system. So it has some potential to mitigate some of the dysfunctions associated with fragmented delivery. But a concern, as we all know, is that the current level of funding by development partners for the sector remains extremely high, around 90%. And so long as they have that level share of funding from donors, it's going to be very difficult to develop a funding mechanism that really contributes to strengthening the government system and facilitates more sector-wide approach with more predictable funding and less dependent on individual projects and programs with their own funding cycles, rules and requirements. Our capacity is being strengthened. This was another of the areas highlighted in MNSSP II. But clearly there's been a lot of capacity strengthening work that's gone on, but it hasn't been monitored at the MNSSP II level, nor is it structured in a way as envisioned. There was talk of conducting a comprehensive capacity assessment that would develop a capacity development plan that would accompany the implementation of MNSSP II. So for sure, there have been some very positive interventions, but the quantum of support and the impact has been difficult to establish. A couple more areas. Has a communication strategy been developed that was identified as a need? And we observed that a complex multi-dimensional program, such as MNSSP, which has impact on people's lives, requires a well-conceived and delivered communication strategy. It's also needed to support sector policy advocacy work and to facilitate learning and knowledge management. I think this is very much recognized by the ministry, but it hasn't yet been designed and implemented. So that's a top priority to get that system in place. With gender, how is MNSSP addressing gender? It was envisioned that there would be a gender mainstreaming strategy, particularly facilitating women's participation in decision-making roles at different levels of MNSSP to design and implementation. An assessment has been conducted and it's currently under review, and it will be on that basis that mainstreaming guidelines will be developed. Of course, gender is treated as a substantive topic. If we go into the different projects and programs, we know that there is significant attention to the gender dimensions of poverty. We know that there's disaggregation of data. There are specific targeted interventions aimed at addressing different sections of the community, girls, pregnant mothers, etc. So that gender is very much, and the relationship between men and women in terms of managing household resources and their access to assets, etc. These are all issues that are addressed. So finally, my recommendations, I apologize for the time I'm taking. Very quickly, the recommendations around leadership: implement the recommendations of the recent review of coordination structures, prioritize operationalization of the pillar working groups. You've heard me say that before. In light of, but also in light of the experiences and the ongoing review of also the national social support policy, which is ongoing in parallel, there will be need to review the appropriateness of the current institutional arrangements and to revise them as necessary. So we need to also wait to see what the national social support policy comes up with. There may be need. With GRM, a number of recommendations around the institutional arrangements. Whereas if we're having a harmonized system, where should we be honed? What will be the requirements? Using the GRM guidelines that are in existence as a living document. We've talked about engaging and exploring opportunities for harmonizing. I think it will be also very important that we cost the implications of trying to develop a harmonized system that requires some pre-existing systems to move away and join another system. With UBR, we've talked about obviously moving towards the 100% coverage by the end of the planned period. Making provision that UBR can be adaptable if we are going to be introducing different targeting mechanisms or approaches, for instance, if elements of categorical targeting are to be introduced. There's a burning need to address the immediate technical and operational delays and costs in terms of the UBR operations, and a roadmap will be needed to support now, as we've heard, that the UBR will be honed within PRSP, that there is an appropriate action plan or roadmap to ensure that appropriate support is provided. With M&E, we have, as I mentioned, the recommendations of the review of indicators. It would be important to make sure that that is now in place, and that ideally we can already begin by by anticipating 6 monthly reports for the remaining period of the MNSSP II. E-payment, primarily around the expansion. As I mentioned, the key thing is now the expansion or the scaling up, but also developing a rollout plan for the remaining districts for MNSSP III, which includes considering, again, cost and the practicalities or the operational and capacity issues that arise. And in that respect, we think it would be important that there is, again, commissioning of periodic feedback sessions from beneficiaries over and above the GRMs to learn about the effectiveness of the e-payment system and to help in troubleshooting system bugs. So that I think it would be good that we get more feedback from the end user on what works and what doesn't. Social support fund, I think very much things hang on the balance of what comes out of the impending study. So I don't want to predict or preempt what might come through, but ultimately there will be some system around which there will be need to cost and produce an investment plan, a cost for rolling out such a system, build it. It won't be an overnight activity. But next to that, we also need to have some investment into the medium and long-term costing of social protection. With all the ambitions we have, do we really have a medium to long-term projection of the costs of delivering social protection in line now with what the National Social Support Program policy will be prescribing? Capacity, I think the main thing here is to do what hasn't been done, which would be to commission a broad capacity assessment covering human, organizational, and institutional dimensions of capacity that are required to ensure that whatever we try to implement is supported by a capacity building strategy that can also be reviewed periodically. Communications, I've also mentioned the need to get that in place. I think in the immediate, we can do some, whatever we can to design some communication products that give visibility to what has been achieved. And of course, the video we're about to see is an example of that, and the policy brief that we've produced. And I think there's lots more that can be done in the name of MNSSP II, but then coming up with a more comprehensive strategy that also takes account of the needs, not just of information dissemination, but how it's going to be used. Is it for advocacy? Is it for awareness raising? Is it for instruction and guidance? Is it for popularization, etc.? And likewise with gender, to complete the gender analysis and use that as a basis for designing a strategy for MNSSP III. My final slide. Towards MNSSP III, I think very much the strength of MNSSP II was that there was a very intense participatory and open review of the first MNSSP, and I think it would be appropriate that that same approach is used at the end of MNSSP II and in the preparation of the third iteration of the program. I think it would be important to reflect on the value added of the pillar approach, since this was a departure from what was there before, and to consider clearly what the preconditions are for it to work and to work well. I think more action, more work, more thinking needs to go into really, maybe it's a bit pompous to talk about a theory of change, but to the intervention logic to explain how our pillar strategic objectives are going to be operationalized into sequenced and implementable actions. I mentioned at the beginning we had 60 actions. It wasn't always clear how they linked together, which should be prioritized, how they would be measured, etc. So more could be done there. And indeed, we need to have a credible M&E framework for the third MNSSP, that we have a more robust basis for monitoring progress and reporting on results and learning. Thank you very much indeed. My apologies for running late as usual, but I hope you found this useful and digestible. Thank you to all of you, and over to you, Bessie. Perhaps, if I may just come in again, if this is not just available now, do we not just move over to the video?
Yes, we can move over to the video.
In Malawi, where roughly 50% of the population live below the national poverty line, there is a pressing need to strengthen the provision of social support and social protection for those Malawians whose living standards are vulnerable to the occasional threats that the country is exposed to. Threats such as floods, fires, droughts, and even COVID-19. The Malawi National Social Support Program reflects the government of Malawi's commitment towards reducing poverty and vulnerability for its population. It is designed to improve the well-being of Malawi's most poor and vulnerable communities while creating pathways for people to become productive participants within the Malawian economy and curtailing unsustainable coping strategies along the way.
The Malawi National Social Support Program is a framework which the government designed in collaboration with different stakeholders, including the development partners. The Malawi National Social Support Program provides an implementation guideline for implementation of social protection activities in the country. The purpose of the Malawi National Social Support Program is to ensure that the quality of the lives of the poor is enhanced, to ensure that the poor are lifted out of poverty, to ensure that the poor also benefit from the process of development in the country. So that
the program provides a holistic guiding framework for designing, implementing, coordinating, monitoring, and evaluating social support programs under 5 thematic priorities, commonly known as pillars. The 3 core pillars are consumption support, resilient livelihoods, and shock-sensitive social protection. And the objectives for these 3 pillars are carried out via 5 primary programs that include the Social Cash Transfer Program, the School Meals Program, the Enhanced Public Works Program, the Village Savings and Loans Program, and the Microfinance Program. The last two pillars are known as linkages and system strengthening, which work to enhance the overall functioning of each pillar and their integration into other governmental interventions that seek to enhance income generation, health, education, and nutrition amongst Malawians.
The Social Cash Transfer Program, popularly known as Ntukulapakomo, is a Malawi government social protection intervention which targets the ultra-poor and labor-constrained households throughout Malawi. The objectives of the program are threefold. One, to address extreme poverty and hunger among beneficiary households. Number two, to promote school enrollment. Number three, to increase the general welfare of beneficiary households, including improving nutrition, preventing child labor, and general child protection among beneficiary households.
Ine mu programu ya Ntukulapakomo nalo mchaka cha 2017 kuchokera programu imeneyi apindulamu nagulamo ziweto kati mbuzi nalibe nagulako mbuzi, nalibe nkhumba nagulako nkhumba. Pano nili pano pa programu ili mauda zitenje ngati posungira ndalama kuti ikakhala kuti nthawi yatalikira tisanalandire tizipeza chogula sopo ndi mauda zitenje.
The Malawi we want is a Malawi that seeks to create wealth for everybody, and the Social Cash Transfer Program is one of those enablers towards that particular future.
Japara imalitandiza 1 kumvesera 2 kukoza 3 kusewera.
Malawi's Music ndi bungwe limene limapereka phala m'masukulu kuti ana azidya chakudya cha mamawa. Akakhala kuti ana sanadye phala chimene chimachitika kwenso kuti mumathika kuyamba ndi ana ambiri mklasi. Koma mukamapitirira ndi maphunziro mango zamba ngati muna pa break pacha ana ena ake athawa.
Homegrown School Meals Program is a community-initiated program. It's community-driven in the sense that if the community would like to go into a school feeding program, they give us a signal. Then we pick it from there. Government provides inputs, and then the community grows crops that they feed their children during school time.
Well, Public Works Program is an instrument which government has been using to actually uplift poor and vulnerable people within their communities. And basically, the Public Works Program focuses more on the members of the community doing some work and being paid for it. In the past years, the Public Works Program was primarily a cash transfer program, whereby we focused more on the members of the community working and providing them a wage that would actually help to meet some of their needs. But as time passed, the Public Works Program changed in so many dimensions because we then tried to focus on another aspect of what is bringing poverty within their areas or where they are living. So we saw that there was a lot of environmental degradation within these areas. And government decided to actually help at least bring back the environment or conserving the environment through the Public Works Program. So instead of just focusing on people working maybe on roads and working maybe to create some assets, we said let them work to create assets that will improve their livelihoods, that will like bring back soil fertility, that will bring back water within their areas, that will also bring back firewood. We believe that the communities now understand that they really need to take a role in sustaining the assets that they are going to be creating during the program, and also ensuring that their areas are well managed environmentally.
Pachikondi ndinayamba 2013 ndipo gulu limene linandipindulira choyambirira nditatenga ngongole ndinagula mbuzi imodzi. Mbuzi imene inandipindulira inkaswa awiri. Ndiye itatero choncho mbuzi yoyamba ndinagula fetereza. Kenako zinaswana yonchija zina ziwiri ndinagulisa ndinalipira fizi ya mwana. Gulu limalilika tikamabanka ndalama ije ndiye timabwerekana ndi mmene ulili wapakira. Ukapanga ndalama yochepa umatenga mwezi umodzi, ukapanga ndalama yaikulu umapanga miyezi iwiri. Ndi marani timapakira. Ndiye tikatero yoncho tikakwana miyezi iwiri ija umamaliza ndalama yonse. Ukadzatero kumazapanga umazakongola ngongole. Ndiye azanga ena ambiri ena kumamala ena apanga plastala fuya udini wachani wa banki ya Chikondi.
Resilient Livelihoods Program helps families in terms of linking themselves to credit groups, whereby they're also taught some financial literacy, as well as how to come up with some small businesses, which they can also help them in terms of supporting their livelihoods.
It is clear to see that, for the most part, people really want to uplift themselves out of poverty, and if they are given the right opportunities, they can do great things that will benefit Malawi as a whole.
As a country, as a government, it's the responsibility of government to ensure that no one is left out during the development process. It's the responsibility of government to ensure that the poor and vulnerable are also integrated within the development process. They are not left out of the development process. Their needs are addressed, and also to dignify their lives.
The Malawi National Social Support Program is driving positive change, but it is still in the early stages of its journey. It has the potential to boost economic growth through a virtuous cycle of purchasing power and investments that can positively impact the well-being of so many more lives throughout the country.
Thank you.
Hello.
Yes, thank you, Tony and team, for the job well done and the very comprehensive report. Good recommendations coming from the review to support the future program design and implementation. So the video which we have just seen summarizes the core programs of the core program of the Malawi National Social Support Program. Moving on, I want to hand it over to Tony to facilitate the panel discussion. We have our panelist today is Daliso Kalimba, Deputy Director in the Poverty Reduction and Social Protection Division, Laurent Kansinjiro, Deputy Director, Social Welfare in the Ministry of Gender, Community Development and Social Welfare, Stanley Chuti, Acting Director of the Infrastructure and Economic Service for the National Local Government Finance Committee, and Albert Saka, the Chief Education Officer in the Ministry of Education. So over to you, Tony, to facilitate the panel discussion.
Thank you very much, Bessie, and I hope everybody participating enjoyed the video. I'm sure it was much more interesting to watch the video than to have to listen to me for too long. I certainly enjoyed the video, and I think it captures nicely the essence of the MNSSP II. What we want to do now is to turn our focus on to some of the key role players responsible for various aspects of implementing the MNSSP II, and to give them an opportunity to reflect on what we've learned. And really, we have just a double-sided question that we're going to ask. And the question is, what do you see, what are the key take-home messages you take from the review? What are the things that stood out for you that were critical or important? And what do you now see as the main priorities that should inform the design of the way we go forward, particularly with regard to the development of MNSSP III? So what are the take-home messages, and what does this mean for going forward in a nutshell? And what I'd like to do is to give each of our panelists a moment to reflect. There's no right answer. It's whatever comes from your perspective, also from your institutional perspective. We have Ministry of Education, we have Albert, we have Stanley coming from the National Local Government Finance Commission, we have Daliso from the PRSP, and we have Laurent from the Ministry of Gender and Social Cash Transfer Program. And what I'd like to do is to actually invite Laurent, perhaps, to be our first spokesperson, our first panelist to speak. You have about 5 or so minutes, and then we'll pass on to the others. And the others can speak, as I say, give their perspective, and then we can have a second round where perhaps we can have a bit of interaction between all of you. So, Laurent, if you can be, if you could be the first speaker to step forward.
Thank you. Thank you, our moderator. Quickly, for us from the Social Cash Transfer Division, our key takeaway revolves around, I think, leveraging on the technology and the push for digitalization in as far as efficient and effective delivery of cash transfer, in this case, into Babakumu, is concerned. I think the review is clearly pointing us to the need to move very, very, very fast and robustly on issues, on matters to do with the e-payment, as well as on building on the technology of the call center, which is just at the infancy stage, as well as also the issue of digitizing case management, especially at intake level, where these cases are registered and are reported. I think that's one key take message and way forward that we are able to take from. And also the other element that I needed to point out, that in the context of the UBR, coming from a background of fragmented approaches to targeting for various programs, acceptability of the UBR as a tool for targeting for all our programs, especially at the local level, needs to be, we need to invest in terms of raising so much awareness. We have seen from our experiences that once we have done our targeting processes, sometimes there are usually feedback from the communities, or sometimes in some cases of dissatisfaction, and a lack of understanding of how the UPR works, and at community level now moving forward. That's an area I think we also need to really invest our efforts in. Otherwise, looking at the objectivity that the UBR is really bringing, this is an investment worth pushing on and pushing on. I think those are the key takeaways and areas that I need to mention in this kind of discussion. Thank you.
Sorry, I was on silent. Thank you very much, Laurent. That's very clear. Technology in terms of overcoming some of the bottlenecks of some of those key systems, but also ensuring that there is confidence in the UBR. Part of that is a technology issue. Part of it is a communication issue, if I understand you clearly. It's also about making sure there's no misinformation, misunderstanding of what role it is, and indeed the role of the districts in that. So thank you very much. We'll give you another chance before we close in case there's anything else you've heard from others you may wish to add on. But for now, I'd like to invite, if Stanley is with us, coming from the National Local Government Finance Committee, which is very much providing the leadership behind the Public Works Programme and others, but particularly the Expanded Public Works Programme. Stanley, if you are there and you can hear us, we'd love to hear your takeaways.
Thank you very much, moderator, for giving me a chance to speak on the presentation. First of all, let me thank the consultant for a good work done. I note that it reflects most of the discussions that we had. To start with, the takeaway from this meeting is the issue of strengthening concentration on the strengthening of the delivery systems. We note that progress is being made in most of the pillars, but probably I think we need to invest more in the strengthening of delivery systems. My colleague from Minister of Gender talked of investing in the UBR to make it more robust so that the targeting is easy for us. Harmonization of the GRM systems across the social protection programs, and indeed the delivery system, the e-payment as key to efficient and effective payment to the beneficiaries. I note that we also have the issue to do with knowledge, passing knowledge of the MNSSP to the communities. We are aware that at a higher level, most of the organizations and the ministries know about this program, but probably if we trickle down to the district level, to the community level, we will note that there is a gap. As such, I think there is need to develop a very robust communication strategy so that this program is well publicized, so that people are aware about what the program is all about. All I know, I think what we have noted is that good progress has been made towards the objectives of the program, but probably we just need to improve on these issues. Just to mention that the design is also another important issue, that when designing programs, I think we should follow the MNSSP aspirations, and I'm glad to mention that the program that we are implementing now, the Malawi Social Support for Resilient Livelihood, is also structured around the philosophy of the 5 pillars of the MNSSP, which are consumption support, livelihood, shock sensitive, and indeed strengthening delivery system. So if all the players in this social protection space can emulate what I think these then we could have a very robust social protection programs in Malawi. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much again, Stanley. That was also very clear, and I take away three key things there. The focus on fine-tuning, refining our delivery systems, also making them more robust. The communications, again, has come out as something that needs to be given more attention, particularly to ensure that we publicize and communicate clearly beyond the national level with our stakeholders at the district and community level. And thirdly, the issue of coherence and alignment around a common framework. And you mentioned that the design should be linking into the MNSSP II aspirations. And indeed, you gave the example of the Social Support for Resilient Livelihoods program, which very much does that as at a programmatic level. So thank you very much indeed, Stanley. I'd now like to give the floor to Albert Sacco, who comes from Ministry of Education. Of course, there we've talked about school meals program, but also the linkages between the issues of access, particularly for those coming from ultra poor, where there may be other barriers to accessing educational services. But over to you, Albert.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for that well done presentation. First of all, I'd like to indicate that really the presentation has really been very eye-opening in terms of the way how we have implemented the program so far. In this case, I will focus on the school meals program, like you've already highlighted. So school meals program is a very important program. It's a very famous program amongst the community because it focuses on linking education access, but also looking at short-term hunger, but also looking at households that are food insecure. So it's a comprehensive program and some health elements in there. So really the presentation has really highlighted a number of things that are working well and also something that we need to improve upon. So we still need to, I think, improve on capacity building across all structures, from national district up to the community. One thing that is very, very strong in the school meals programming is that it has a number of models, but the one that is mostly like a pillar now is the homegrown school meals approach because of this strong linkage with the community. So we'd like to build upon it and improve coverage using this model. Of course, this model is also affected by a number of things in terms of floods, drought, etc. But at the same time, we have tried to link it with other programs like Public Works program, and we intend to do more. When we did it, we saw that it worked, but I think somehow we did not proceed, but would like to expand it more and also maybe link it also more to social cash transfer, because already it's also handling issues, it's also linking to issues of nutrition, which is also part of the school meals programming. We also want to, like you have already mentioned in your presentation, want to focus more on how best we can improve our data collection, analysis, and use. So maybe we need to also go digital, but at the same time, we'd like to liaise with our colleagues from social cash transfer if we can also use the UBR in some aspect and see how that can work. So this one also has already been highlighted by your presentation. But also you have pointed out about the operational strategy. For example, the homegrown or another school meals operation document that will stipulate everything which is also part of the objectives of the MNSSP II. So we're also going to work on that and believe that is going to help us improve even our coverage. The most important thing that also I've noticed that, as you already highlighted, the program heavily relies on multi-sector collaboration. So we intend to improve and continue collaborating with ministries of, for example, agriculture, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Economic Planning, for financing, etc. And right now, what we're doing is we've linked school news program to some of the shocks. For example, we are disseminating the take-home ration to those that have been affected by disaster in Chikwawa and Nsanje. So with support from WFP, we're doing that, which we think is going in the future. We want to link more of this into the actual programming of the school news program. So I think all in all, we are in support of the outcomes of this, and we intend to build, to improve our programming on this. But just one thing, I just want to make a correction on the figures for the homegrown. So the homegrown is in two aspects. There's the one that is being supported by partners like World Food Program, which is linked to the cooperatives in terms of farmers that grow crops and then supply to the schools. On the other hand, is the government-supported homegrown school meals program. So in total, we have reached 850 primary schools as of now, which is a great improvement based on when we started. And we have also been able to reach more than 873,904 learners. So just that improvement to be reflected in on the data that you just presented. Otherwise, so far so good. Thank you, and over.
Thank you, Albert. That was great as well, very clear. And you actually listed quite a number of points. So let me just quickly summarize that. You talked about the overall need for continuous capacity building. You talked particularly about the need to push the homegrown approach further. You've just given us some additional statistics on the current levels of coverage, but also the further opportunity for expanding homegrown. You talked about linkages from a number of perspectives in terms of a multi-stakeholder collaboration, in terms of the linkages to shock-sensitive support, working with public works program. You talked about the improving data collection, particularly through digital methods. So that's all very good. And I think we also, it's nice, it's good to hear that these are useful, that the observations or the conclusions we drew resonate with you, and that you feel that these are things that provide a foundation or basis for going forward. So thank you very much indeed, Albert, for those interventions. So this now takes me to Dalitso from the Poverty Reduction and Social Protection Division in the Ministry of Economic Planning and Development. You've heard from the line ministries, and now as a coordinating ministry, as a central agency, with also the policy holder for social support. The floor is yours to give us your summing up.
Yeah, thanks so much, Tony. I think for the presentation of the findings and a very beautiful video as well on our MNSSP II. So much to take away on our part as coordinators and policy holders of Malawi National Social Support Program, but just to highlight maybe one or two issues. First, it's coming out clear that MNSSP II was indeed quite an ambitious program, a significant departure from the first MNSSP, which was being implemented in silos in terms of the programs, public works, social cash, etc. Now the pillar approach, I think it was quite a huge challenge, and I think it has taken us time to adapt to the new arrangement. Hence, some of the challenges that have been highlighted in terms of operationalization of the coordinating structures, etc. However, 2 years down the road, midway in the course of implementation, I think we are optimistic that we could improve in terms of how we operationalize the pillar approach of the MNSSP II, and even beyond the rest of MNSSP II to MNSSP III. Just one more area to highlight. I think if there's one pillar I think we really haven't done very well on, I think it's coming out clearly already from the report, is pillar 3, which is the shock sensitive social protection. I think at the time when we're coming up with MNSSP II in 2018, the importance of this pillar might not be at the same level as it is now. 3-4 years down the road, the issue of shocks has become more prominent and having a huge impact in terms of livelihoods of our poor. I think it's clear the shocks have become more regular as well as more severe, and hence the need for us to have an effective shock-sensitive PIRA operational. I think the challenges were highlighted. One, we still haven't developed the vision, the ambition for its operationalization to guide its implementation, as well as the coordination structure for the PIRA is there. But we have noted that, and I think in view of the urgency to operationalize the PIRA, we will try as much as possible to make sure within the remaining years that we have that PIRA being implemented close to at least the intended levels. I think for now I can just leave it there. Thank you very much.
My apologies, something popped up on my screen and I could no longer access Zoom. So the silence was unintended. Thank you very much, Dalit. So also for zeroing in on two critical dimensions that add to what else we had heard, particularly noting the ambition and the very real challenge of shifting from one way of working to another. So the adoption of the pillar, the thematic approach. These things sometimes sound easy, but we know to operationalize demands quite an investment of time and effort. And we don't always anticipate what some of those challenges might be. So that's very well noted, as indeed you mentioned, getting pillar 3 right. And again, in both observations you make, it's very much around institutional challenges of how we work together and how we work differently. And I think it's a very realistic assessment of some of the challenges that have been experienced. So there we are, we have now received from our panelists their take-homes. I think we're probably running short of time, but if there's anybody among you who'd like to add anything else from what you've heard of the other panelists, here's your moment, just for a quick observation, no obligation, but if there's something, I'm looking at Laura now on my screen. Laura, is there anything? Are you okay? Putting you on the spot.
Yes, that's what I can see. But you know, we are amongst the interventions under MNSSP II. I think we are one of the most prominent instruments of social protection. So really being put on the spot is just worthwhile, and yeah, we welcome that. At the same time, I think I think the thread that runs across all this in terms of sustainability still remains the issue of financing, resources for sustainable social protection. And I think we welcome, I think emphasis put on the social support fund, which we think in part will help take us to the direction of sustainable financing in as far as social protection as well as social rights transfer program is concerned. So really, I think that's what I wanted to emphasize. It's really a component that needs to really be to have the attention that it deserves. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurent, and thank you for bringing up that issue. And in a sense, as in a previous meeting, somebody said the elephant in the room. It's something that cannot be ignored, and the SSF has a role in providing a framework, but there needs to be some obviously serious reflection and discussion around how funding in the future can be organized, and increasing obviously the share of funding that comes from domestic sources to reinforce that it's coming from others. I see that Albert has his hand up. So Albert, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I just wanted also to agree with my colleague Laurent that I think for these programs, for us to be able to reach our goal and also improve our coverage, there is need to increase also the financing base. Currently, for example, the schools program, in collaboration with Ministry of the collaborating ministry, and also within government, several ministries would like to come together and see how best we can share in terms of several components. For example, within the schools programming, the other components that fall directly under several ministries for intervention. So we'll need to sit down and see how best we can share the responsibility in terms of financing. But also would like to promote the homegrown school meals approach so that we don't just depend on rain-fed agriculture, but would rather go maybe irrigation wise, so that we should be able to grow maybe 2 or 3 times a year, and to make the program self-sustaining. And then if we overproduce, we sell, get the money, use it within the same schools. So in that way, I think sustainability will be a bit improved, and also the ownership of the schools and the community will be enhanced. I just wanted to add that. Thank you, and over.
Thank you very much, Albert, for a kind of more innovative approach to finding ways of resourcing and financing, and with an potential income generation component too. Thank you very much. Okay, Stanley or Daritso, if there's anything on your side, here's your moment. Otherwise, I'm mindful that the clock is ticking, and we probably have to draw this to the close. Daritso, thank you. I think I got a nod from you there. Stanley, you're okay as well. So let me therefore thank you all for your interventions. I think it really was a very welcome way to round off this presentation. You've heard from the consultant, you've heard the video. Now we hear from the people who are actually putting the levers for some of these key programs. So we really appreciate your time in participating, reviewing, and sharing your ideas. At this moment, I'd like to sign off and hand over back to Bessie.
Thank you, Tony, for facilitating the discussion. And thank you to Laurent, Daritso, Albert, and Stanley for taking part in that discussion. To our audience, I also want to say thank you for taking your time to be part of this dissemination for the Malawi National Social Support Program midterm review. At this point in time, I want to hand it over to Madam Zimpita to give her closing remarks and officially close the webinar. Madam Zimpita, please.
Thank you very much, moderator. I think as we come to the end of the dissemination event, I would like to express our gratitude as Malawi government to all of you for the active engagement from the different stakeholders who have been a part of this process of the midterm review. Throughout the process, a lot of invaluable ideas were contributed through various consultations, as well as the sharing of ideas and experiences from different quarters. The midterm review process for the Malawi National Social Support Program has helped to enrich our understanding, as well as to expand our knowledge base on issues of social protection. I also therefore just want to thank the team of consultants led by Tony. The report has brought out a number of issues that are critical to the successful implementation of the Malawi National Social Support Program. I also want to appreciate the panelists, our panelists, for sharing your experiences and your thoughts on the Malawi National Social Support Program and how we do things as we move forward. Let me also not forget those who have worked behind the scenes in terms of ensuring that we are able to have this event, including to have the whole midterm review process implemented. And not forgetting the support that the German government has given us in terms of providing the necessary support to undertake the midterm review process. Otherwise, the onus is on all of us as stakeholders of this, the Malawi National Social Support Program, in terms of how we move forward, henceforth with regard to implementing the findings and the recommendations from the report. Otherwise, it remains for me to thank each one of you for participating in this dissemination event and also for your interest in the social protection programs and activities. It is therefore my sincere hope that the support and interest you have towards social protection will continue so as to ensure that the lives of the poor and vulnerable are improved. I therefore want to thank you for your participation and your attention. On this note, I wish to declare this dissemination event closed. Thank you very much and bye.
Thank you and
Thank you,
bye-bye.
bye.